All right, hello everybody. So this is the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today we have another discussion, and it's a interesting one as always. And today we're going to talk about the death penalty. All right, and this is in light of a case, right? A case of someone who is about to be, or at least at this time of recording, who is about to be sentenced to death. And in fact, he was supposed to be sentenced to death quite some last week, right? But he managed to. I won't say he managed to, but the sentence wasn't carried out because he had COVID-19. All right. So now the discussion for today isn't about him. It's more of the death penalty itself. Should we or should we not have death penalty? All right. What are your take, guys? No one wants to start. Don, death penalty.
I'm saying no, man. Abolish the death penalty.
See?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really against the death penalty. I think it has no place in like modern society. I think it doesn't really achieve its goal. I think it just makes the person become the scapegoat, and it doesn't really focus on what the main issue is. I think also that it's really against human rights. And I don't really like the idea of the state having this power to kill you anytime that they want. That's basically my thing.
All right. Okay, so what's interesting is, Sim, you were saying just now that it doesn't achieve what it's meant to achieve, right? So what exactly is it supposed to do? What is this death penalty about? Deterrent measure, I guess?
Yeah. Exactly. So they always say like I think Lee Kuan Yew, Shanmugam, all of our ministers would like to say that or go about this calculation theory where is this sort of theory in criminology. So it's basically where they believe, right, that every criminal is a rational person. So being a rational person, right, they will calculate their risk and then they calculate their reward. So if they realize that the risk is too big, for example, death penalty, they won't do it. So they will then go on to say that the reason why Singapore's crime rate is so low is because of the death penalty. The reason why our drug rates are quite low is death penalty. The reason why blah blah blah, death penalty, blah blah blah, caning, blah blah blah, capital punishment. So they believe that the harsher the punishment, then there's a very strong deterrent measure behind it. But if you actually look at the CMPB stats for drugs, for example, I think it was about quite consistently low, and then recently after 2013 up to 2016 2017, suddenly it doubled in sort of like the record number of drugs that were captured in terms of monetary value. So I guess that kind of really debunks about like how having the death penalty will actually minimize or actually like abolish any forms of crime of that nature because the like it's kind of stats right there. I mean, sure, you can make the argument that people will kind of be put off by doing it, right? But it's rare to say. Is it because their conditions improve? Is it because they don't, they get better jobs, they get better education, they get better friends? Or is it just because that we have this very strict law and that's why they are not doing it? It's going to be a very hard one to kind of argue for. But then interestingly, right, if the whole idea of like every criminal is rational and you need to have a very strong deterrence for them not to commit the crime, right, then I think Portugal kind of like adds a very good counter argument because you can do drugs in Portugal, like literally, I think with a few exceptions to some but I believe most drugs in Portugal is legalized. So the government realized that the drugs on war wasn't going to be fought by law and that just telling people don't do drugs is not going to be the answer. So what they did was they legalized it, they regulated it, and they, they sell it in safe amount of forms, and then it kind of like destroyed the value of like, oh, drugs are cool because it's illegal. Now it's like quite lame because everyone's doing it. And then they are also well educated in like what drugs do. They actually tell them like what these drugs are, what they do to your brain, the side effects, the risks, the benefits, stuff like that, rather than just our way of just kind of educating the community, which is like, oh, just don't do drugs, haram. Yeah, and then their drug rate is actually quite low. It's surprisingly low for a country, especially who that don't like criminalize people for taking or selling drugs.
Right.
So you would, one of the things you were talking about just now, right, was the idea that it's not effective. It doesn't solve the actual social issues that we have, right? And especially if we are going to talk about this recent case, right? I think his name is Nagaenthran.
Nagaenthran, yeah.
Nagaenthran.
Yeah.
So with Nagaenthran, I think one of the more popular or things that have been highlighted is that of his condition. There's what made him had to do the crime that he did, right? And does it actually warrant a severe consequence? What are you think?
Well, first of all, he has a low IQ, man. Yeah. He doesn't pass off the normal IQ rate. So
this also goes back to what Sim was saying, right? About
human rights.
It's not true that everyone is anyone who commits an offense is a rational person. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, continue.
So with that in mind, this whole idea of hanging someone with such mental capacity would be barbarism, like straight up barbarism. And there are many other cases in Singapore that are not even drug related that are going on that doesn't even get a severe punishment. Like, for example, let's talk about molesting, things like that. These cases just go under. It doesn't get highlighted as it doesn't appear on the spotlight much. That's why you got more molesting cases that comes up every now and then. You don't get any harsh punishment or anything. Yeah. And it's rising. It's not just there. It's rising.
Yeah. So I can think of two counter arguments to that. So number one would be, well, precisely because there's not a lot of harsh punishments being meted out to such crimes that the cases are rising, right? So all the more we should increase harsher punishments. That's one. Number two could be that shucks, I just lost my train of thought. It's precisely because there's not much harsh punishment being meted out that these cases are rising. So the way to solve it is through harsher punishments, right? Yeah, that could be a point.
So actually, speaking of like sexual assault and harsher punishments, right? I actually believe Singapore used to hang people who were murderers and rapists. Okay, for murderers, I think they still do, like especially for those more serial killer, crazy kinds. But like for even for rapists, they actually used to hang them. But I don't really think it stayed anymore. They had some reform, and then they just took it away. So I'm not exactly sure what the stats was at that time, but I know that sexual crime in Singapore, right? If you're looking at the past, like recent years, maybe 3-5 years kind of thing, maybe it's been increasing, but I know decade upon decade, right? I think it's been slowly falling, if I'm not wrong. But correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not too sure.
Murder cases, right? So are we talking about death penalty? Absolutely no death penalty, or is it okay, for certain crimes, if it's it's an eye for an eye kind of thing? So you murder somebody intentionally, it's all well planned. We are not talking about manslaughter here. We're talking about downright murder. Then you deserve the death penalty, or absolutely no death penalty, right?
I think for me, right, I would sort of abolish it completely, regardless of the crime. Like, and that would even have me to defend murderers, like pedophiles, crazy people, all of that. Yeah, I would still abolish it. But before I get into like all the reasons why, right, even if let's say he had a mitigating factor, like for example his IQ was 69, I don't think that is like a very concrete argument. That is a good enough argument to get actually sort of scot-free, not scot-free, but sort of like him walking away from the death penalty in Singapore, because they do make like exceptions for that. But the reason why they don't, right, and why someone could make the counter argument that he still should be hung, is because later on they actually did some psychiatric sort of like evaluations at MOH and everything, and they had a proper interview. I think a couple of psychiatrists went to see him, and then they found, right, that actually he's actually conscious, although his IQ is low, right, at 69, he's actually conscious, and he's actually fully knowing and acknowledge what his action would have done and caused. So that's the reason why the judge is still going with it, because this created quite a lot of flack overseas, in the US, in the UK. Like, they were very surprised that, how come Singapore is hanging a person with IQ of 69? But yeah, actually, what the courts found was that he's actually more than capable, and not as unintelligent as people would normally think, but irregardless of his IQ condition, right, I would still be super against having the death penalty for any crime.
Don,
I wouldn't say completely abolish it. It depends on the crime. That's where I'm gonna go. Like for murderers, not manslaughter or anything, straight up murderers, yeah, you hang them. Yeah, that's where I'm gonna go. And you give harsher punishment to in accordance with the crime they did. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
To me, I personally, sorry.
Yeah, so goes back to the idea you were talking about, right? Yeah, so about the comparison between the drug mule and someone who does sexual assault, right? So one could argue that the sexual the one who committed sexual assault is the victim is just one victim, whereas for drug mule, the victim could be hundreds, and of course,
correct.
If you want to blow this up, it could be like thousands and so on, right? And it affects families, right? And there has been many cases where CNB officers, at least in Singapore, when they storm into houses, you find small children all being unattended right there, and there has been anecdotal I guess evidence or stories talking about CNB officers raiding units where the parents are actually consuming drugs right in front of toddlers, right?
Yeah.
So this is the kind of impact that drugs have on society, and this warrants a serious consequence, right? Yeah. So if you talk about the matching the crime to the punishment, so drugs is definitely, I think, one something that people have argued that it's a serious enough crime. Right up there. Probably even worse than murder. One could argue. I guess.
Right.
Yeah, but these are the things that we don't see, directly or immediately. Right. So these are more of the social consequences, the long-term consequences of drug prevalence in the country, lah. But again, like what Sim pointed out just now, right? So is death penalty or is the having harsh punishments the only way to to prevent drug prevalence, or drug abuse rather, right? Could legalizing drugs be a solution as well that we should consider, right? So that's something that for us to talk about. But that's drug, right? So yeah, the death penalty itself. Yeah. So Don, you wanted to say something else?
I forgot what I was saying, man.
Sorry, man.
That's cool.
I think on the point of like punishment fits the crime, right? That whole idea is like suggesting that the reinforcement has to be equal to the outcome. So would you then reward someone for not raping or for not doing a crime?
For not raping someone, would you reward them? No. Because this only applies for not reward system. It's a more of a punishment system.
Okay. Yeah. Then what would you say is there to gain from punishing someone over rehab?
Rehab applies for drugs or for murderers as well.
Okay, right. But in the sense for death penalty, there is no rehab though, right? Because you are literally killing the person, so that he can't. He had no second chance at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess what we can agree on is that death penalty, if it's being championed because it's a deterrent measure, no, the argument doesn't hold. But now I guess the question would be, is it something that we want to see justice, I guess, right, being served? So Don was talking about murder, right? So you've ended this poor innocent person's life, so you deserve to be hanged, right? You deserve to die for that crime.
But you can also create injustice though, because once you give the state this power and they wrongfully sentence someone, then it's a total case of injustice. Like, for example, if someone is being framed of being a murderer but doesn't really have concrete evidence, and you sentence him to die after 5 years of investigation, and like it looks probable that okay, maybe he is, because he cannot prove that he's not a murderer, and then boom, there's no coming back from that.
So I think there are advocates of people who will say, hey, no, it's better for someone to be sentenced for to life imprisonment compared to death sentence, like what you said last time, right? So in the event new evidences comes up, and then hey, look, this guy is actually innocent, right? At least he can be redeemed, even though he has served sentence prison time for a very long time, but at least he's going to be redeemed, right? It's going to be exonerated. But whereas for the death penalty, once the guy's life is taken, then that's it. There's no returning. There's no coming back from that, right? But I can think of a counter argument, right? So this is probably true in, I guess, in some countries. What about in Singapore? How often do we actually hear of I mean, we don't have trials here, but I mean, we don't go by the jury system, right? So so how often do we actually have cases where people, someone who has been sentenced to death is actually someone who is innocent, right?
I think even if, let's say, our record has been 100%, right? I don't think it's a moral act. Like, what do you gain from killing someone, even if they killed someone else? Like, what's the rationale, or what's the rationale behind that? Like, you won't bring the dead back, you won't make their family feel happier or safer, and even if they feel safer, is that the society that you want? I get my revenge. It's very vengeful, and I don't think two wrongs make a right. And then, is it also fair to make the perpetrator's family suffer to feel some sort of relief?
So this goes back, I guess, to the point about what, yeah, you're saying, talking about society, right? So what do we want as a society? What kind of justice system do we want? Do we want one that is retributive, or do we want one that is focused more on reforms, right? So yeah, something for us to really think about. Right now, I think a lot of attention has been given to the government itself, right? Saying, hey, look, the government should abolish this and abolish that. But there's not the so the discussion has been the public through mass media, social media, directed towards the government directly. But I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't recall any actual discussion in Parliament, because that's where this the the level of sentencing are being gets passed, right? It's through Parliament, it's through the laws, aren't they? Right. So, and let's say we have general elections coming up. No one talks about death penalty, right? Hey, look, vote for me, vote for us. We're going to abolish the death penalty, right? And so that's for the political parties, and for us, the people. We also don't say, hey, look, I'm going to vote for you only if you decide to champion against death penalty, right? So that doesn't happen. It happens only when cases come up. Someone is about to be sentenced to death, and then we talk about it, and then uh, and then it dies down, right? And things don't change, right? The argument that, hey, look, we need it for either a deterrent measure, or be it for this is what society wants. We want a retributive sort of justice. It stays, right? So status quo remain, right? Because these things are not being discussed in Parliament. Anyway, that's my take, right?
Do you guys think that Singapore's low crime has to do more with like harsh punishments, or it being a police state, we have high security measures, we have good societal principles and values, upbringing, our government is very controlling, and as a society we're quite submissive, and our general like low poverty and lack of homeless populations? What do you think makes our crime rate so low? Is it really just the punishment, or
I think it's because of harsh punishment, fear. Yeah.
okay? But what about places like Iraq and Pakistan, or places in the Middle East, right, where they have still like draconian laws, like meaning very, very strict laws? You steal something, to cut off your hands, but their crime rate is still much worse than us. Those punishments are, you would say, worse, right? Like, I'd rather go to jail for 6 months for stealing something than get my hand chopped off, but their crime rates are still higher.
I think because they think they can get away with it. Maybe because it's a big country, not much surveillance, things like that. So it's like, oh, I can get away. In Singapore, it's like
Police state.
You'll get caught. How long can you run? Like if you look at all our HDB blocks, it's like camera every like, I don't know, 5 minutes.
So it's more of
it's
like having high security measures rather than the punishment.
Yeah, they all play a part though. They all play a part. But if you want to compare with Iraq, I would say it's surveillance. Yeah, but if you were not to compare with any other countries, then I would just say it's fear and punishment.
I think it could also be the fact that hey, look, how we may have been brought up as well, or at least for quite a number of Singaporeans, right? So the idea of strict the tiger mom, the strict parenting approach. Hey, look, it has worked for me, right? So I think that's how society should be governed as well, through the strict approach. Right? I turn out okay. Yeah, no, I'm not doing criminals. Why? Because of my strict parenting. If my parents weren't strict, I'd probably be a nutcase. So so that could be a reason as well. Right. Yeah, but interesting question, right? Yeah. For us to really think about our low crime rate, what is it really due to? So if the death penalty isn't really the reason why we have low crime rate for serious crimes, then why do we have the death penalty in the first place, right? If it's about retributive justice, then that's a matter of principle, matter of philosophy, I guess, and for society to really talk about, to discuss. And I think, so like what I said just now, I think the only way if for things to change is for this discussion to happen in Parliament. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's where people are represented, or at least supposed to be represented. Right.
But to me, I think
otherwise the government is just going to brush it off and then say, look, these are just some noise speakers. Right? Yeah.
Like, I think it's going to be very hard for the government to kind of accept the evidence and the stats on like how, or like even the other factors that actually affect this whole deterrence and how we should actually justify not having this death penalty. They and the reason being, right, it's probably because they want to make it as like perpetrator centric as possible. They just want to look at the person and then blame him rather than actually looking at why he becomes that person, like this Indian guy who sell drugs or decide to come and smuggle drugs into Singapore. Is he a fucked up person, or was he just someone who wanted $500 so he could give to his family? Because he has low IQ, he probably doesn't have a good job, he's probably in a shitty situation, he just had to do something for his family. That is the hard question. That is the hard sort of systemic change that the government has to deal with once they have to agree that the death penalty doesn't really stop drug smugglers from coming in. We are just hanging the already marginalized and discriminated people. Because actually, if you look at the stats, right, I think so far all of the sort of prisoners on death row have been mostly like Indians, Malays, and there's some Chinese as well. Like I think out of 66, about 60% is made of Malay on death row. 15 of them Indians, which is you might think it's okay, it's not that much of a big number of 66, but you remember that Indians only make up like 5% of our population here. And then the rest, I think like 10 or 20 is Chinese lah. So there's quite I would say substantial theory that one can make and talk about social justice here. They also can talk about actually if you kind of see the trend, if you also look at the class and the race, you also find that majority of the people that come from these situations, right, they come from very bad backgrounds. They come from lower SES, and that's the inequality of Singapore playing out. But that's the thing that it's very hard to change, and it's not very pleasant for them to bring up, the topic about Chinese privilege, talking about discrimination between races, why certain races earn less, why certain races are more vulnerable to doing certain crimes because of what they are born in, what they have. So it's gonna be quite self-defeating for the government to admit that, okay, actually part of the inequality that caused all of these people to become drug dealers or whatever are actually parts of our own system and our policies that made this inequality happen in the first place. Which is why they are still trying to debate so hard and use all the funny arguments to kind of justify why that this is still needed. And even for like things like freedom of speech, I'm not sure if you saw the other day, like they don't really like people to kind of talk about these kind of issues, hence why we get this podcast, right? But they were having this funny argument about freedom of speech, where I don't know if you remember, but Amos E, he used to be a very rambunctious, crazy, wild YouTuber, right? And then he drew, I think, when Lee Kuan Yew died, he made a video called "Finally, yes, Lee Kuan Yew is finally dead" or something like that, and he got like over 1 million views. And he drew Lee Kuan Yew having sex with Margaret Thatcher, which is like the UK's PM at the time lah. And then everyone was outraged. And then the government took down the video. They come to find him and they wanted to jail him, whatever, threaten him or whatever. And then they actually did. And then everyone else was freaking out. They say, hey, this is a human rights violation. There's no freedom of speech, blah, 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 blah. And then after that, now, fast forward 2021, Amos E just got arrested for pedophilia, right? I think he wanted to have sex with some young girl in the US because he's in the US now because he had to like kind of seek refuge there. And I think he also didn't serve the army or something like that. So he's literally a wanted man, like if he comes back. Anyways, after he got sentenced, and then I think he's on the way to prison right now in the US, Shanmugam literally that day just came up to say, where are all the people that were supporting Amos E freedom of speech now? Now that he has like done this crime. But then actually, if you think about it, the people who were supportive of him at that time and having the Hongling protest, right, was just voicing out the need for freedom of speech to kind of like say whatever and not do crimes to children, if you get what I mean. But he kind of
it has nothing to do with this,
nothing to do with this like pedophile actions. Like who the hell knew that Amos E was going to turn out to be a pedophile, right? But then he kind of comes in and then kind of twist and like distort, so it becomes like
cheap shot.
Yeah, it becomes a cheap shot, and it also becomes a red herring, right? Like a distraction. So like look, then instead of talking about the main topic at hand, like there's no freedom of speech in Singapore, or like there's still the death penalty here, we are being brought to have a discussion about what freedom of speech leads to pedophilia.
Yeah, so it's the idea of not wanting to talk about the actual issues, but rather the focusing on what I think some people would call character assassination, right? So you assassinate that character, you demonize that character, and then you focus all the attention on that character. Rather than talking about the issues at hand. Yeah, so that's why we have strict punishments, I guess. Right, because the government doesn't want to talk about the issues at hand. Okay, so that's one. Oh, that's an interesting take. All right, Sim. All right, so death penalty. Should we have it or should we not? Don, any other thoughts?
No, man. I'm just more curious on how the case is gonna turn out. Yeah. A huge population of them are saying he's gonna get hanged no matter what. Yeah. COVID just saved a life for a period. This is the first life COVID saved.
Literally. Yeah.
And it's just for time. Yeah, just for a period of time. Is to get all the. There's so much attention on this case from other countries, like what Sim said, UK, US. It's just to get all these reporters away, for the time being. Just like a cool down period.
Why do you think so, though?
Why?
Why is this unlike the other cases? There has been attention given.
It's because of his IQ. Yeah. If there was no IQ involved, he was just a normal guy like you, me, nothing. No other countries or what's the guy's name? The Virgin Airlines, the dude.
Richard Branson.
Yeah, even he tweeted something about it, right? Yeah. It's all because of his IQ. That's why there's so much spotlight on it. I mean, there were so many people got hanged in Singapore for drug. All the while there was nothing. It's the IQ, man. That's why. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so going back to what Sim was saying just now, right? So it's inhumane, I guess, right? So there's quite a number of people. That's why we have all these people criticizing the decision to sentence this person to death. Right? Okay, so Sim, any other thoughts?
Yeah. I just saw the statistics on like the death penalty, and then it says that the number of I think in the late 2010 the number of executions started to increase again. In 2019, 13 people were executed, the most since 2003. So it's like it comes to that deterrent like argument again, like, you know, for the most of the times, you know, it's quiet, and then suddenly we have a huge increase, and then is then what do the deterrent people say, like, oh yeah, just for this year it's not. And I mean, it just really lacks any consistency. And I think also an interesting thing to kind of think about is like, how did the death penalty even come out, right? So from what I've seen was, it's just sort of created to become a threat to manipulate society, to create fear in form of not only like your behavior, your thinking, your actions, but also to add discrimination and to add to like colonization powers. So for example, right, if you committed heresy, if you were like, you know, to talk back, because last time how like I think about, if you're thinking of like 16, 15, 17th century, 18th century, right? Probably up to the 19th century even. If you were to talk bad about the state talk bad about the church had like proper powers last time. They could literally hang you for that. They could call you a witch and then burn you at the stake. They could kill you for betrayal, even for like insulting of songs. Yeah, I know there were other crazy laws, like if you marry a Jew, or if you trade with Indians, those were enough to actually warrant a death penalty for you. I think if you want to think about like colonization and how that added to like the white people power, right? If let's say they colonize a certain area, and then you're being very defiant to your superiors, quote unquote superiors, right? That could also warrant, you know, betrayal. They would see that as betrayal, or they would see that as, you know, insubordinance, and then you have to be put down to kind of show the others who's the boss here, and that so that they won't mess with you. So it actually has a very, very, very dark history by itself. And I think also, besides the history, and besides like the sort of preventive implications that the death penalty can cause, right? I think something that's not really talked about is also the trauma to the victim, to know that they have sentenced someone to death, the trauma to the jury, the judge, and especially the executioner. Like, I don't think their mental health is going to be A1. Like, if we will have to like a sit down interview with a guy who has like committed maybe 1,000 murders throughout his like 10, 20 years of being an executioner, I'm telling you, probably he's mentally fucked at some at least a certain extent. Because like if we look at even dairy workers or like factory farm workers, right? Those sort of people doing those kind of like, I guess, rural jobs that nobody would really think about, they actually have quite high mental health issues, you know, like for those like who kind of have to hit the cow in the head or use a stun gun on the cow every day of their life, it kind of creates like a sociopathic behavior in them also, because when they carry out these violent acts, right, they're kind of like numbing themselves, and they're also sort of developing a very good tolerance to like having any empathy or sympathy. So like they could literally just like whack the animal and not feel anything, because that's their job, right? So over time they also lose a lot of themselves. They become less human in a sense. And I think that's one of the things also that's not really looked at or talked about.
Yes.
So those are the reasons why I still feel that it's going to be very, very problematic should this continue on.
Yeah, so there's actually there's many layers, right, to death penalty besides the the obvious, you know. So there are so many layers to the death penalty itself that we have not been talking about, or that we are not talking about as a society, not just in this episode. All right. Okay. So any more last words? So if not, right, this has been the good, the bad, and the ugly of the death penalty. Why do we have it? Right. So if it's to deter crime, has it actually been effective? Right. Or if it's a form of justice, then is it a form of justice that we as a society want, or do we want a society where we can focus more on reforming the criminal and think about why the criminal committed that crime in the first place, and then we may even want to think about why has that particular action been criminalized, right? If you are talking about, let's say, drugs, right? So death penalty, again, should we keep it? Should we abolish it? All right. So this has been an episode of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Till next time. Bye-bye.